It gives me great pleasure to welcome our fantastic panelists now. Sunil Kashul, Regional CEO for Africa and the Middle East for Standard Chartered Bank. Sunil, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Ana Paula Assis, General Manager for EMEA for IBM. Welcome, Ana Paula.
Thank you.
And Maha Akatan, Group Chief People and Sustainability Officer for DP World. Pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much. I hope you're having a good Davos so far. I think you've just arrived, is that right?
No, I came in yesterday.
Okay, fine, good. So you don't feel too exhausted. Brilliant, okay. Well, Sunil, let's start with you. When we talk about sustainable infrastructure, tell me what comes to mind and how vital a role it will play in emerging markets having that just transition.
So there are various aspects to it. If you look at infrastructure per se, emerging markets have a huge requirement for infrastructure. And it would be doing a disservice to them if we really don't help them transition to infrastructure which is sustainable, which follows sustainable principles. And there are various implications to it. If you start putting infrastructure which is not sustainable, which would mean that very soon or in the coming years, it'll become a stranded asset. It's capital that is wasted. So we see our role in various facets. We see our role in actually ensuring that capital comes into the right infrastructure projects. There's a right framework set up for it. And you monitor it on a regular basis to make it, first of all, so that you avoid any sort of greenwashing or social washing, whichever way you look at it. So it's very important that financial institutions play a role here to ensure that you have capital coming in from the developed world to the emerging markets, because the demand and the deficit is so massive, so massive.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and we are playing our part. We are playing our part across Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and I think we're just at the beginning of it. The runway ahead is huge.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Ana Paula, let's bring you in, because I know that you speak, of course, very regularly to senior managers or CEOs right across Middle East and Africa. So what are their thoughts when you talk to them about sustainability? I'm sure they're very aware of it, but where are they in terms of with progress with their sustainability strategies?
Well, I would say they are more aware than ever and more focused than ever. In a recent study that we did with CEOs around the world that also covered Middle East and Africa, 52% of the CEOs in the region see sustainability really as a top priority, and that's 22 points from our last study, which was 2 years ago.
Huge leap then.
Huge
in just 2 years, and they've had the pandemic to be dealing with this.
Absolutely, but I think the pandemic just brought this aspect front and center. 58% still see ROI and 49% regulation changes regulatory aspects as challenges to drive sustainability in their supply chains. 63% are already implementing, so a lot of initiatives underway, but lack of insights on data continues to be a tremendous area for them to focus on. So technology, how technology can really contribute to improve sustainability is an area that they're really looking for to understand how technology can support them in those initiatives. So I would say that at this moment, a lot of awareness, a lot of focus, better understanding of how technology can support them, and getting insights from the data is where the focus is going to be going forward.
Yeah, okay. Maha, let's bring you in now, because DP World, an enormous logistic company, and you have huge amounts of every kind of infrastructure possible, haven't you, around the world? You've got ports, terminals, marine services, very complex supply chains. So where are you in terms of transitioning your infrastructure to one that can cope with the climate better and also have a better carbon footprint?
So there are two elements to this transition of ours to a more sustainable infrastructure. The first one is looking at the impact that the climate change has on our business as DP World, with a network of 97,000 employees across 6 continents, and all the businesses that you mentioned, from port and terminals, logistics, and marine services.
And are you seeing a big impact? I mean, do you see you put the news on and we hear about weather here, there, and everywhere. I mean, are you seeing that?
Of course, the extreme weather fluctuations, temperature fluctuations, sea level rises, these will have impact on our business. So we first look at the impact of the climate change on our business, and we put a resilience plan for that to make. As you see, investors are actually asking us to put in financial terms, these business risks of climate change to incorporate it in our finances, right? So it's really important first to understand the impact of climate change on your business and put a resilience plan. The second element is to actually look at our impact as a company on the climate change. So the strategy of DP World is to enable smarter trade for a better future, and our sustainability strategy of our world, our future, ensures and makes sure that we do and run our operations in a more sustainable way. So we have a decarbonization strategy of net zero by 2040. We are well on track with this strategy in our ports and terminal businesses. We are reducing emissions by 3% on an annual basis through equipment electrification, looking at alternative low carbon fuels. But when it comes to our marine services business, it accounts for 70% of our carbon emissions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So over there, we do require medium to long-term strategy enabled by technologies.
Yeah, yeah. For many people, that just started. So Sunil, let's bring you back in here. I mean, tell us what the role of finance is then in sustainable infrastructure, and what are the key characteristics of when it works well, if you have any examples?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at, so we did a survey. We went out to what we call the $50 trillion report. We went out to fund managers and investors who manage about $50 trillion. And they say that their investment in the emerging markets varies from 2 to 5% in terms of the allocations for sustainable finance.
Which is tiny.
Which is tiny. And then on the other hand, you look at the recipients of capital and you ask them, what's constraining you from migrating from, say, a traditional financing product to a sustainable way of financing, which sometimes can be costlier. It can be costlier. And they say it's lack of finance. The lack of finance is 65 to 75% of the respondents say lack of finance is the biggest constraining factor. So we see our role to actually play a go-between and be the bridge to really bring in capital where it is there, looking for deployment, but giving them the right opportunities where they feel that their capital is being put into the right projects, it is in a bankable commercial way, and it is safe in terms of credit quality. And that requires a framework. It requires mechanisms to monitor. It requires taxonomy so that they can understand what the metrics are, what the definitions are. And I think that's a massive, massive opportunity for us. That's a massive opportunity which we're implementing. I'll give you a classic case.
Please.
A Middle East company was wanting to put up a coal-fired plant in Egypt. And they had all the financing set up. They had the export credit agency financing, etc., set up. We firmly believe that this asset probably would not have a life more than, say, 20 years. Given where the world is moving. And we finally convinced this group to move towards solar power, equal amount of power generation, set up a structure where we brought in blended finance. So sometimes you need to bring in a mix of finance, which is not only private, but public, philanthropic, and multilateral and concessional finance, which made their costs cheaper. So there is a big duty that the finance world has to ensure, if you want to make sustainable finance mainstream, that is compelling and competitive. Otherwise, it's very difficult in a market, particularly emerging markets, where they need power to say, you go for green power, but it's going to be more expensive.
Of course.
It becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. But that's also where the opportunity is.
Yeah, that sounds it. Anna Paula, let's bring you back in now, because you talked about the role of innovation. IBM, an incredibly innovative company, you're at the forefront of technology, aren't you? So what role could the likes of AI and big data have in helping some of these companies in Middle East and Africa move towards net zero?
Yeah, so what Sunil was saying is exactly, the challenge of identifying an ROI as you do this transformation. And technology will help you in many aspects. First, really making sure that you optimize your asset infrastructure. So how can you really make sure that whatever you have already installed can deliver a better output? And that's where the management layer or asset management layer of our portfolio can support. Artificial intelligence in the terms of improving automation and providing better ways for you to predict how certain environments and how certain situations are going to behave depending on effects like extreme weather and other elements. For example, we have worked with a group of agricultures in Africa in order to help them providing better information about what is going to happen in terms of the climate and how you optimize crop and agriculture initiatives. So another technology that is becoming more and more interesting to assess is quantum. Quantum in the sense of discovery of materials, and quantum to run simulations that can help companies make better decisions of how they're going to implement their grid, particularly when we talk about sustainable energy and using multiple sources of energy. So all these technologies are going to be providing better insights to companies on how they're going to invest in their energy capabilities going forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Maha, you said in the past that the path to longer-term goals relies on new technologies, government policies, and also market-competitive carbon offsets. So what progress are you seeing on those fronts?
So we're seeing great progress when it comes to technology. I'm actually witnessing it firsthand in our business. We achieve
what
this.
way?
So we achieve this through using disruptive innovations to improve supply chain. For example, in Jabal Ali today, we are testing a new technology called Box Bay. Box Bay is 100% powered by solar panels. That's one. Number two, it has the ability to stack containers up to 11 stories, which reduces 70%, reduces land use by 70%. So you reduce cost and it's more productive for the business. We've also helped level the playing field for a lot of the farmers in Africa. An example is a logistics platform that we built in Kigali, through which the avocado farmers in Kigali today have access to dinner tables, say in Dubai and rest of the world.
That's fantastic. I know you've got a great example as well, haven't you, with some poultry farmers in South Africa. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, exactly. So poultry is really an area that you have challenges in how you really, make sure that you have a very sustainable process and provide quality and track quality. And we use a lot of artificial intelligence to help companies in this process.
So, Sunil, you talked about the potential very, very well. How can we improve then emerging markets' access to sustainable finance for infrastructure resilience? What would you like to see happen?
I think, first of all, if I just start putting some numbers, if we start allocating a mere 2.7 or 3% of developed world GDP, I'm talking about financing, not the GDP moving, but financing equivalent to just 2.7 to 3%, that's going to jumpstart, in terms of allocation, just the allocation, that's going to jumpstart emerging market economies by 4.5%, and incremental growth. So first role
that's an enormous number as well.
That's an enormous number.
4.5% is
4.5% upside.
Yeah.
So most important is to really get capital flowing into the emerging markets. We have taken a time period about 2060 from now on to put these numbers. The requirement is about $95 trillion. Now, the world will move towards green. There are a couple of pathways to it. Either you say to the emerging markets, you self-finance it. And how are they going to self-finance it? They'll self-finance it through higher taxation or local borrowings by crowding out the private sector. Now, that's going to bring down consumption by 3.5% to 5%. That's going to be very, very punitive. So the choices we have is, do we make them self-finance, or do we put the excess savings that are sitting in mature economies into work in emerging markets and really get the upside? I think that's very important. On the emerging market side, you need to have a big role for us is advocacy, to really bring home the point that you need to move towards sustainable finance because it is better in the longer term. It's a difficult explanation. It's a difficult, rationale to push through, but that's very, very important, and people are getting it now. And then really ensuring that there is no washing taking place, because the first scandal that takes place, you're going to have capital getting pulled back. And that's the role we play. That's the role we play by putting the framework, the structure, the monitoring, giving assurance to the capital providers, because the markets are massive. The markets are massive. And for us, really success in sustainable finance is when the whole ecosystem develops. Around the framework, around government policies, regulations, not just doing a couple of transactions. I think that's very transactional. And that's what we are pushing towards. The good news is, in Africa, Middle East, sovereigns are getting it. And if sovereigns get it, when they allocate their budgets and they spend in the economies, they're the big part of the economy. Unlike the West, where the private sector is very large, or even Asia, where private sector is very large. In Africa, Middle East, is the governments that drive the economy. So if you get them on board this sustainable path, which they are now, I think it's a job
That's very
half done.
positive. That's
Yeah.
a very positive sign. Anna Paula and Maha as well, we've not talked about people, have we? Which clearly is the most important thing in all of this. It's important having a lovely port if you've got no one to run it. How is there really? But so talk about your efforts, Anna Paula, in terms of upskilling the population or upskilling vast communities, particularly in the emerging markets.
Yeah, so I think there is a great opportunity for us to use, particularly in the sub-Saharan Africa, where in 10 years we're going to go from 370 million adults to 600 million. So imagine the potential you have there of workforce working in those technologies that are becoming absolutely essential to drive sustainability. So at IBM we have a number of initiatives. One of them is called the Skills Academy that we actually initiated in Africa, bringing a platform that can teach basic skills around technology with partnerships with local schools in order to enable those populations and those students in having access to knowledge about technologies such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, cloud management, data and analytics. We have a program called Pathways to Technology, where we normally do with partners, where we sponsor schools and we provide mentoring programs to accelerate the learning around the technology. So lots of initiatives and programs in order to accelerate the access to skills in those technologies so that we can tap into this base of talent.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you must get a lot of reward from that. Do you enjoy that on a personal level?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Maha, same for you, because you are Chief People Officer. So this plays right to you and to what you're very passionate about.
Absolutely. So education is one of the three legacy pillars of DP World Sustainability Strategy. We have I was actually talking to Sunil this morning that sustainability is not only about net zero and climate change, right? Sustainability is beyond that.
Yeah.
If we want to have a more innovative, equitable future, we really need to educate the generations of today and tomorrow. We've recently at DP World partnered with UNICEF to educate 33,000 people, young people in Bosnia and Ethiopia on digital skills to prepare them for the job market. And if I look internally in DP World, this year in March, we launched Women on Board program. We took the high potential senior female leaders in DP World, put them on this 8 weeks board development program. So once they finish the program, we'll deploy them on our subsidiary boards across our portfolio. That will also help increase diversity representation at board level within DP World.
And you two are both role models as well. Do you feel that?
We try to be, right?
No, well, females at senior leaderships, particularly in emerging markets, is very important, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we have a huge responsibility to bring others and provide the space and the opportunity for others to develop as well.
Absolutely. Well, that just about brings us to the close. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's so nice to have a chat. Sunil Kaushal, Anna Paula Assis, and Maha Akatan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma.